So I'm going to go on and bring the highlight of this whole thing. Maddie Smith. Maddie is going to talk to you all about clean energy, and they are the expert. Not just because I believe that. They are the expert in this arena in the DMV. So please take a listen, and I will turn it over.
Thanks, Robin. Robin was frozen for a second. I'm wondering if it was my internet or yours, Robin. But hey, everyone. It's really good to be here with you all. I'm Maddie. Like I shared, my pronouns are they, them, and I am the clean energy shepherd. Can you all see the full screen? Did that work?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Always great when I figure out the technology correctly. So really my role as clean energy shepherd, which I think is like the coolest job title ever at IPL-DMV is really to support houses of worship like y'all to save money and energy by, going green, caring for God's creation. Really, like my job is to connect you all to the things that are available out there for houses of worship to be able to do. And of course, every, congregation is going to be unique, but we've also been able to learn a whole lot about, what works for folks and like how, you can benefit from clean energy and energy efficiency, etc. Since we're a small group, I'm gonna ask my colleague Ethan to monitor the chat and like feel free to like shout out questions as they come up. I have some stuff I want to go through, but I also like please feel free to ask questions, as they come up. This first slide is just a screenshot of our solar congregations map, which you can find on our website at ipldmv.org/solar. Ethan, that'd be great if you could put that into the chat for folks. And this is just a map of basically every house of worship or faith-based institution that we know of in the DMV that has solar. And so we're constantly adding to it, like almost every month we add a couple more folks to this map, which is really exciting. And as you can see, there's quite a few folks in Montgomery County, Maryland, Prince George's County, right sort of around DC. DC's kind of covered by all of these green and pink. Um, congregations in Virginia or Maryland, but DC, we have many, many folks in DC that have done this. And so I just like to show this map to kind of talk about, there are lots of folks that we can all learn from and that we have learned from for how houses of worship can benefit specifically from doing solar. And I won't be talking just about solar. I'll also talk a bit about electrification and energy efficiency. But, also encourage folks like please set up a time with me to talk further about anything specific that you want to do at your church. And my colleagues, Ethan, can put that link into the chat later when we're done. So I really love this picture. This is a picture of the solar on top of Florida Avenue Baptist Church in DC with the Howard hospital in the background. And this, I think they were like among the first Black churches in DC to do solar. This was before my time, so I can't speak to that project specifically. But they were sort of kind of the trailblazers on this in DC. And then this is Covenant Baptist UCC, also in DC. They did their solar, oh, I don't remember, quite a number of years ago, but more recently than Florida Avenue Baptist. And I think now we're up to 100 plus different houses of worship in DC that have solar. You probably, for folks in the DC area who are driving around, you probably drive past solar houses of worship, maybe without even knowing it, all the time. So I kind of wanted to get to the number one question that people have been asking me first. So you might have heard there's some hullabaloo out there with the tax credits for solar. And so what we are trying to do basically right now is tell our folks that we can still do congregational solar projects that can benefit from the tax credit. We have time, but like right now is the perfect time to start thinking about it. Like, so you all are in great company. Was telling Nils as he joined our team a few weeks ago that like this is the busiest we've ever been in terms of number of like pending solar projects in faith communities. And it's because of this timeline and these deadlines that we're working off of. And so like right now is the perfect time for folks who don't have solar to be thinking like, could we do this, before these tax credits run out? So the answer is yes. So for commercial projects, which a congregational project would fall under, your project needs to start construction by July 4th of next year. That's like 1 year from the date the big budget bill was signed this past summer that sort of implemented the tax credit changes and did a whole lot of other things beyond that. So you have to start construction by July 4th next year or have your project placed into service by December 31st, 2027. That second date, the placed into service date, makes people nervous because it relies on your utility to finish what's called interconnection. So like a lot of times for solar projects, they'll put the solar panels up, it'll all be ready to go, and then you'll still be waiting months to get permission from your utility, whether it be Pepco or BGE, or Delmarva to like have them come out and inspect it and give you permission to actually turn your solar on so that you can begin producing energy. Therefore, like to avoid, putting faith in the utilities to do things that they're not incentivized to do quickly, the best thing to do would be to start construction by July 4th next year. So we have a good amount of time to be able to do that. That's sort of the deadline that most folks are working towards. And the good thing is that we have a little bit of flexibility in terms of what's the definition of start construction. So that means that you either start physical construction on your project or you spend 5% of the project budget. So like if you can just spend 5% of the budget of your solar project by next year, July 4th, you've done what's called safe harboring your project, which means that you can get the tax credit. And of course, I like to say, I'm not a tax professional. I always encourage people to talk to a tax professional if this is something you want to do. But like this is widely understood in the solar industry right now of like this is what folks need to do to ensure that your project, can still benefit from the tax credit. Just the other thing that I put here is that there are a set of restrictions on what are called foreign entities of concern, or FEOC is the acronym that people are using, that does kick into effect for projects that start construction in 2026 or later. So like that is an added challenge to doing solar projects. It's basically like they're targeting Chinese solar materials, which is where, the vast majority of solar materials come from. The good thing is that there are folks who are thinking about how to meet these requirements in order to still have projects meet the tax credit, like meet the requirements to get the tax credit. I will say that, like, in my experience, not every solar installer or developer is like thinking about this in the ways that they should. And so if you like are looking at solar bids, ideally we would be able to help you with that. But that's something you should always ask solar folks about. Is like, are you prepared to meet these requirements? Because, we need to get the tax credit for our project. The one kind of bummer or bad news here is that the residential tax credit for homeowners runs out a lot faster. So like the silver lining here is that we have time to do congregational projects. If you want to put solar on your home and you want to own that solar and take the tax credit, if you haven't already, started that process, it's kind of too late, unfortunately, to get the tax credit because, you have to install it by the end of this year. And what we've heard is like all the solar installers are pretty full up through the end of this year. Um, I'll just note that the like base tax credit for solar is 30%. So like that's important because that, cuts down on the cost of solar and makes it so that these projects, pencil out or have, quicker rates of return. Okay, and I just wanted to flag, not everybody owns their solar necessarily, but being able to secure this tax credit and sort of work towards this timeline is important for all of these projects. And so there's a couple different ways that our congregations do solar, and they don't, one of them doesn't involve spending any money at all. And so I kind of want to just very briefly go through like the options that folks have. I'm more than happy to like meet one-on-one with congregations as well and go through more in depth what these two options look like. And a lot of times when I meet with folks, they say, well, let's look, can we get proposals that compare both, ownership versus third-party ownership options, like how, like, let's see what we could actually afford and what the numbers look like. So, one way to do this is to have the church, like your church could purchase solar panels. You would own that yourself. And like I always tell people, like owning your solar is the way to maximize benefits for the church. Like that's, that's always going to be true. However, like owning solar involves needing to pay for it, with this large upfront cost, even with the tax credit, that's 30 or 40% depending on, what your project is like. Um, there's still 70 or 60% of the project that needs to be paid for there. And, if you're applying for the tax credit, you won't get it back for about a year after you put your project into service. So it's still like there's still a lot of money involved, and like that is still a barrier for many, many of our houses of worship that, are working on very slim budgets, and don't have cash lying around to be able to do this. Or you may not have access to good financing that would allow you to do something like this. However, we do know of folks that are doing this that want to own the solar, and like that is the way to like maximize the long-term savings for your congregation. This other option that is sort of has zero upfront cost is called a power purchase agreement or a PPA. And actually on our website that has our solar map, IPL-DMV.org/solar, we have a pretty good resource page there that goes through like everything you would need to know about a power purchase agreement. And that's because we found it's a really common way that folks go solar, but it's not, conventionally well understood by folks outside of, the solar world. And so we kind of go through that to show like how these types of agreements are possible. And so I encourage anybody who's thinking about a PPA to like go through that page with your decision makers. So with a PPA, the church would not own the solar panels. So a company would own solar panels that they would put on your roof. And so therefore, they're paying for the cost of the solar. You're not paying anything. And then what you do is your building would agree to buy the energy those panels produce at a cheaper rate than what you're currently paying your electric utility. So there's zero upfront cost and you start saving on day one, month one, year one. Um, but like your savings are going to be greater over time if you own that solar yourself versus having to pay somebody for the energy that those panels produce. However, the PPA is a really popular way that our houses of worship still choose to go solar, mainly because, the barriers to owning your solar, the cost mainly is still significant. And the PPA is a great way to like sort of cut down on your expenses, and lock in, what you're going to be paying for a good amount of your electricity for 20 or 25 years. Um, I'm talking to lots of houses of worship right now who are considering both of these options. And so I would say every community is different, and like my job is to help you understand, the options, what might work for your community, and how, you can actually do this, hopefully. So really quick, sort of, rewinding just briefly. I've talked a lot about the tax credit and how, houses of worship solar projects can benefit from it. And a question I get a lot is, but we're nonprofits, how can we claim a federal tax credit when we're not really paying federal taxes? And this is a common misconception, and this has only been around for a couple of years. So it used to be that houses of worship and nonprofits could not, benefit from the clean energy tax credit, and now they can. And that was a result of the Inflation Reduction Act that passed Congress in 2022. Um, and that was one of the, boy, there was a whole lot of things in that bill this summer, the big budget bill, but like getting rid of this mechanism by which nonprofits can, monetize the tax credit was not one of them, luckily. So like we still have this timeline we're working on for the phase out of the tax credit, but nonprofits like can still get their money back from the IRS. And the way this works, we've had several houses of worship in DC and Maryland and Virginia that are doing this or have done it. And it's a process by which you go through like registering your clean energy project with the IRS, and then you go through the process of actually filing a tax form called a 990 that some of you may or may not be familiar with. And that allows you to get, then the IRS will process your 990 and you'll get, a direct deposit or a check with your 30% of your solar project. We've had folks that have done this that have gotten their money from the IRS. I know I'm hearing a lot from people that this makes them nervous just due to the current state of our federal government. And obviously, we can't predict what wild shenanigans are next, but right now, like the law says that nonprofits can get this tax credit back. There are lots of folks that can help you do this. We can point you to a lot of resources. And we've learned a lot about this from like the guinea pig congregations that have done this first a few years ago. So all that to say that like you can do this. I know it makes people nervous, and I'm not discounting that. And like, you know, this is a way to help make solar more possible in for your faith community. So this slide just very briefly goes into some of the reasons why folks might choose a PPA, or like who does what in terms of a solar power purchase agreement. So, the congregation, like I said, there's no upfront cost. You're not paying it for anything. Um, you're not paying for the solar panels themselves because somebody else owns them. That means that the folks who own them, usually a third party company, like will also get all the benefits from that solar. But the congregation also benefits by paying reduced, rate for most of your electricity, depending on the size of your project compared to like your usual electricity usage. One of the reasons why folks like this type of arrangement is because, the house of worship is not responsible at all for the solar. Like you don't have to worry about operations or maintenance. You just agree to like sort of pay this bill every month for the solar electricity, which will be less than what you would have paid your electric utility for that electricity. And right now, we're kind of sort of the state of things is that electricity rates are only going to keep going up. Um, and so, our goal here is to help as many houses of worship try to do solar and see how you can benefit for solar. One, because it's a good thing for the planet and our earth, but also because it's great for your community. And like I know like we're in a time where I know, all of you would rather be using some funds instead of paying Pepco or BGE or Washington Gas, would rather be using those funds to help care for folks in this time, um, when folks are losing their job and federal workers are going out without pay, etc. So, just very briefly, I like spend a lot of time talking to houses of worship about their desire to do solar and coaching them through that process, and would be more than happy to meet with you all and talk about the potential of solar at your house of worship. My email address, maybe Ethan can throw it in the chat too, is Maddie at IPL-DMV.org. And then there's also a link that he'll put in the chat that's for scheduling a time on my calendar to just meet and talk about whatever you want to do at your congregation and how, we might be able to get it done and like get you some benefits for it. Like really the goal here is like let's help make your house of worship as like financially sustainable and like physically sustainable as possible. Generally, when I talk to congregations about wanting to do solar, I can also connect you to solar developers or installers that could offer you proposals. And I'll just note that like as a like nonprofit that works with many different communities, like we are pretty vendor neutral when it comes to like, connecting folks to solar providers. And like there's a lot of folks in the solar industry that aren't great at working with houses of worship, and like we like to connect our folks to the folks who we know, like know what they're doing, um, and can offer things that are helpful to our houses of worship. So we have a number of folks that we could, connect various folks to. Um, and like I'm always happy to facilitate getting bids or proposals for your house of worship. What we would need to be able to do that is 12 months of your electricity bills for your building. A lot of churches just have one meter. Sometimes you have more than one electric meter. Like we would need to know that. And then any information about the material of your roof, its age, and like any warranties you have with it. So, really quick, I wanted to share, let me get back to my right screen. So there's a pretty exciting opportunity right now for folks that are located in Maryland, and I know a lot of you are, I'm thinking, at least some of you are from Maryland, and so right now we are trying to let folks know about this solar grant opportunity for Maryland folks. So this is the Maryland Energy Administration website, and Ethan can put the link to this grant in the chat, and we'll also include it in a follow-up email. But this is the Maryland Energy Administration's commercial solar grant program, which, as you can see, is supposed to launch by October 2025. And now it's like the last week of October and it hasn't launched yet. Previously, this said by September 2025. And so we've been like waiting for this grant to launch. And, before it launches, we want to make sure our people know about it and that like this is an opportunity that your church could benefit from. And we know quite a bit about this program because actually one of our Black churches received this grant last year to help offset the cost of a solar project. This was Zion Hill Baptist Church in Baltimore, which is a pretty small congregation, but they got some money from the state through this grant program to lower the cost of their solar project, which then means that the benefits would be increased for the church. So we want to try to make like they're giving out again. So one thing I want to preface is that we don't have all the details for this year's program, and we know a lot from last year's program, and the people at Maryland Energy Administration, whom I keep bugging about this, have told me that the program is going to be very similar to last year's. And so the way this has worked is that, this grant is not available to everyone in Maryland. It's in the past has been available to folks that are to commercial buildings that are located in census tracts that are designated as overburdened or underserved or both. And there's like a map from the Maryland Department of the Environment that we use to check, your congregation's address and see if you're located in a spot, that would qualify you for this program. Again, that's our best guess. And I think it's a good guess based on all the information we have of who's going to be eligible this year. And like, we will 100% confirm that with folks who are eligible, like when the grant launches. So if this is something you think you might be interested in, please let us know. And we can double check and see, do we think you'll be eligible for this? And then when the grant itself launches, like we can let folks know. Again, it's supposed to launch any day now, hopefully. I'm laughing because I've been checking it every day for like 2 months, so it will come at some point. We know it's coming. I'll just note that this grant is really good money towards a solar project for your house of worship, and the amount of money they give out is enough to like make ownership potentially more possible for folks that otherwise might think, I don't think we could own our solar because it's too expensive, so we would go a PPA route. I'm talking to like actually quite a handful of Black churches right now who previously might have thought, ownership is too expensive, we probably can't do this. And like they're actually like pretty sure they want to own their solar now if they can get this grant because it makes it more possible. So my understanding is they're giving out about $7 million total this year. These numbers are from last year. And this is the amount they gave out last year. So it was like a pretty significant amount for the Zion Hill project that I mentioned. It ended up paying for 40% of the cost of their solar project, which is really great when you think about stacking that on top of the 30% tax credit. So like that's paying for 70% of the project right there. And so like there's not going to be an opportunity in the future where the federal tax credit law is how it is right now. Ideally, someday things will be better on the federal level. And right now, like stacking this grant, if you're in Maryland, stacking this grant with the tax credit is the way to make solar the cheapest it's ever going to be for your house of worship. And so that's why I'm really encouraging folks like, if you have an inkling at all that solar is something you might want to do, like this is the time, right now is the time to start moving on this. Both because of the tax credit timeline and because like they have this money, they have $7 million, they're going to give it out, and I want our folks to get it. One of the reasons why this grant is great too is because the way it's worked in the past is it's been first come, first serve. So if you're eligible, if you're in one of those census tracts that we think makes you eligible, they start giving out money in the order of like that they receive complete an eligible application. So like if you want this money, like my goal is to get our congregations right in line with their applications submitted, right after this grant opens. because they're gonna start giving out money to people that like really makes it so that you can benefit even more from solar than, without the grant. Um, I'll just note that last year this money, and they had a little bit more money last year, it looks like. The all of the funds were allocated in 2.5 months, which sounds like, a longer time for a grant that's first come, first serve. But we know that because of the tax credit timeline, the demand is way more this year. So like I'm really encouraging folks like get your application in when it opens, to ensure that you can get some of these funds. Um, Again, we're checking this every day. We will let people know when it opens and we have all of the details. And then our goal is to just, get folks in line to submit for these funds. One thing I'll just mention is that your solar project could benefit from this grant whether or not you want to own the solar or not. So if you want to do a power purchase agreement and you're located in an eligible like census tract, you can also benefit from this even though you're not going to own the solar. And the way this works is that if you're doing a power purchase agreement, the state, if they award you this money, would just require that the company who owns the solar offer you a better rate on the PPA than they would have otherwise been able to, without the grant. So like you can benefit from it whether you do a PPA or whether you decide you want to own the solar. I only emphasized ownership with this because the grant money makes ownership more possible for folks. Even if that's not something that you're interested in or still wouldn't be possible for your community, like the grant is also the way to maximize benefits on the PPA. And so that's why I'm really, trying to get folks to um, go for it. Okay. That was mostly what I wanted to share about solar. I have a little bit I also want to share about energy efficiency and um, electrification, but I wanted to, I'm seeing there's a few um, questions in the chat, and if people have specific solar questions, I thought maybe now would be a good time to pause and talk about them. Yeah, adding to Robert's question that says in Maryland, are regulations governing this type of project local, specific, or generally the same across the state? Um, most like generally the same across the state in terms of what, you can do for a solar project and what that looks like. I'll say the utilities vary a little bit in like how long it takes them to like approve your project and tell you you can turn it on. Yeah, so Jamila asked a good question about the names of the eligible census tracts and says she's in Baltimore. So there are many, 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 many parts of the state that are quote eligible census tracts, and so I would say a good portion of Baltimore is included on that map. And so if you want to send us the address for your congregation, we can look and confirm that, like, do we think you are likely to be eligible based on what we understood about the grant last year and the fact that they told me it will be very similar. So it's not a short list. It's a big long list of many urban and rural and suburban parts of the state. Um, so if you think, oh, we probably won't be eligible for that based on where we're at, like, please check with us because there are a lot of folks that we think are going to be eligible for this money. Oh, Jamila, if you're with Mount Lebanon, I know for a fact that you're eligible because we've looked up your address before for the electrification grant that you all received. But yes, for other folks, please check with us. Um, we really want, what we've learned is that the Maryland Energy Administration is not great at advertising their programs to real people. And so, like, that is what we're good at. And, we don't have $7 million to give out, but we know these folks who do, and we would love for you all to get it. Okay, and this is I think if there's no other specific questions about solar, this is a really good segue to talking about, some of the harder stuff to do in houses of worship around electrification and energy efficiency. So there is another grant program that's available to Maryland folks. And I know there's folks that aren't in Maryland here, so thanks for your patience on this. But this is also a really great program that Maryland folks should know. So this is called the Electrifying Community Buildings Program, and it's a grant that helps pay for electrification and energy efficiency projects in many different types of community buildings, including houses of worship. This is the second of 2 years for this grant program. And last year we had gosh, like 5 or 6 of our houses of worship received funds to do different projects in their community, including Mount Lebanon, who Jamila is here representing. And this grant is a little different from the solar one I just explained. This is a competitive grant, meaning that, there's a set due date. It's not first come, first serve. Um, and I think it's due sort of at the end of, yeah, the end of 2025, is the deadline. And so we had quite a few houses of worship, like I said, receive these funds last year to do a variety of different things. But like the main things that you have to do is you have to do some sort of like electrification project, which specifically in this case refers to switching from, a gas or oil fueled furnace or hot water heater to like an electric heat pump, um, for heating and cooling your space, or, a heat pump hot water heater. I talk to a lot of folks who have really old, inefficient equipment in their churches. This is, I think it's pretty common across the board that folks are sort of, keeping keeping the building going and hoping the really old, you know, oil-fired boiler doesn't go out in the middle of winter. And like we know these projects are expensive, and this is one way to like really try to pay for some of them. Um, I hear from folks all the time about how much they're spending on, gas and electricity, and if they have fuel oil in the winter, like those costs are really expensive. And like switching to something like an electric heat pump or even like a heat pump water heater is a way to really cut down on cost, and it uses a whole lot less energy, that's you know, obviously better for the planet, but also better for, your congregational budgets as well. We have specific folks, like a lot of times when people come to me, they say, we know we need to do something energy efficiency wise in our building, but we have no idea where to get started. We have some folks that can help you figure out where to get started, and we would, love to help you figure that out without having to pay like $5,000 for an energy audit, to figure out what to do, because we know our houses of worship, we don't have that money lying around. Um, so that's this grant specifically. I'll just add that there are programs in DC too that will help, pay incentives for electrification and energy efficiency projects. I'll say probably, um, the lowest hanging fruit that anybody can do to try to save some money on your Pepco or BGE or Delmarva or Potomac Edison bill would be to do a full building lighting, LED lighting retrofit. If that's not something that your church has done, please email me because we can get you money to do that, and in some cases it can be no cost to you or like relatively low cost that can be spread out, on your utility bill for a number of months if it needs to be. But that's the easiest, cheapest or free thing that you can do to save money in your church. Kind of along with that, if there are like, lighting sensors that could be added or something, if there are kids that always leave leave the lights on or non-kids that also leave the lights on. Like getting that sort of system set up in your church can be a good way to sort of, lower your electricity usage throughout the year and not just, during heating, during times when the building needs to be heated or cooled during certain times of the year. Um, I'll mention that, in for folks that are in Maryland, again, the state's energy efficiency program is called Empower Maryland, and it's run by the participating electric utilities. And what we can do is we can hook you up with them to get what's called a free energy walkthrough in your church if that's desired. And this is not the same thing as a full energy audit, but it is a way to get a professional into your building for free, to think about what what you can do in your building. Because I know, like, again, a lot of the challenge for folks is figuring out where to, even get started. I'm going to share some other slides really briefly, just sort of go through this. Um, okay. So again, this is talking about what's available in Maryland. You can get this free energy walkthrough, and then I'll also note that like this Empower Maryland program also has money to pay out for projects. So like the lighting, they have funds for lighting, they have funds for heat pumps, heat pump hot water heaters, all sorts of some other sort of more energy efficient appliances. It can vary. And it's based on what utility you have. I'll just note if there's anybody on here that has Potomac Edison as your church's electric utility, they are doubling the money that they'll pay out for projects that are approved by like the end of November, which is great. The other utilities also have money that they will pay out for it. It doesn't cover, you know, 100% of the cost or close to that even, but it does help make some of these projects more possible. I'll just note for anybody that's in Montgomery County, there's a little bit more that we can connect you with to help. So in Montgomery County, the green bank there, which is amazing, and like we think every county should have a green bank like the Montgomery County Green Bank. They can help pay for a lot of the cost of an energy audit for your congregation, depending on where you're at in the county. And I'll also note that if you're in Montgomery County and your church is above 25,000 square feet, then we can get an engineer from the County Department of Environmental Protection to come out for free to your building and do like a walkthrough, and he can make a report about your building's equipment and like where are the best opportunities to like improve your building's energy efficiency. Very briefly, if I don't know that we have anybody from Northern Virginia on this call, but there is some grants in Fairfax County that will help pay for an audit or energy upgrades. It's not a ton of money. I think actually this is the page I wanted. But there is, some money available for Fairfax County folks. And then I wanted to find my DC page. Oh, I don't think I have it. Yes. So unfortunately in DC, there's not a current incentive to like get a free energy walkthrough or anything like that. But we do have like some folks that we can potentially connect you to that can help you also figure out what to do. and then they can help. They would talk to in DC, the entity that gives out money for energy efficiency projects is the DC Sustainable Energy Utility, or DCSEU as it's called. And so like I haven't talked a ton about funds in DC. There are funds that are available. Um, and like please let us know if you like have a project you want to do in DC, and we can figure out how can we get you connected to the folks that can help you do it, and how do we pay for it, and what does that look like. I think that is most of what I wanted to cover in terms of energy efficiency. Let me see if there's anything glaring I forgot. Oh, one last thing that I wanted to share. So this fall, as part of we're doing this, as I talked about, big push around clean energy and energy efficiency. So this is a link to a like public facing spreadsheet that we made that talks about, how can houses of worship benefit, from clean energy, and like what programs are available, but also like how can individuals or homeowners or renters, benefit from these things as well. So I won't go through this in depth, but just to say that, today we're mostly talking about congregational buildings, but there's a whole lot of, doing these things at home is also important too, and is a good way to save folks a lot of money. And so Ethan can put the link to this in the chat, and we'll include it in a follow-up email. And just really the goal is like, let's spread this information so folks know what's available. Um, and we know that individual people of faith will also be interested in, what you can do at home. Okay, I'm gonna stop there. Um, yes, and I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything, because I know I talked about a ton of different things like fairly quickly.
No, thank you. Thank you so much, Maddie. It was so good. You have so much, just so everyone understands, Maddie's done 40 plus congregations already in terms of solar and energy efficiency, energy audits. So you got the expert right here, right on screen. So if you want to connect with Maddie, please use the uh, emails in the chat, or you can email back me. We'll get you to Maddie. So I want to thank you. Thank you so much. Does anybody have any questions, even if it's residential? It's okay.
Or if it's something specific to your building, like I think we also have a bit of time to like, I'm happy to start talking to folks about their buildings if you have specific things you want to do.
Or if you know of other congregations that we have a lot of signups, so there are others obviously interested in this. So we're going to share the recording, but we would love you if you have any questions now, we'd love to answer them. If not, um, that's okay too. No pressure. It's at night. Everybody's kind of tired. Everybody's worked all day, so I get it. If you want to come off mute, you can.
Good evening, everyone.
Hi.
All right, my name is Thaddeus Williams. I'm from Hughes Memorial United Methodist Church in Northeast DC. This has been awesome tonight. I mean, a ton of information. But we have a unique situation over at our church. I'm the trustee chair there, and before I came aboard, we had some solar panels that were attached to our church. We have 295 solar panels that are on our church that basically they're we're sharing we're giving them rental space more so they're paying us on a quarterly basis, and what the church failed to do was to somehow tap into where we're part of that energy that's being generated at the church. And I'm at a loss right now. I'm trying to figure out how can we get involved with the panels that are on our church. So what I'm going to do, with the information you gave me tonight, I'm going to contact you, Maddie, and just give you a scenario of what we have and see if there's anything that you can do to maybe put us in the right direction. But this was something that was done, prior to me becoming trustee chair. So I'm in the process right now of seeing if we could correct the wrong that we did. And the
Yeah,
information.
that's a
Okay.
great question. Yeah.
Okay.
So you're not getting, it sounds like you may not have what's called a net metered system. It sounds like you might be a community solar host site. Does any of that sound
It
familiar?
sounds familiar. Yes, it does. Yes, it does. I've some of the former trustees that we have are no longer, with us, and so during that time to get answers, I just don't have anything that's clear cut. So I'm trying to, well, any way that I can find out this information, I'm just looking at all the sources.
Yeah, no, that's great. And I know with turnover, it's hard to like keep keep track of
Right.
everything. And, in my experience, many solar companies are not great at communicating with houses of
No, they
worship. Like
aren't.
they're generally like pretty terrible at it, which is where my job comes in. But it sounds like to me that you're probably a community solar host site, which means that the panels are connected to the grid and not directly to your meter. And
Right.
then the way the church benefits is from that lease payment.
Which is
Um,
minimal.
how much is it?
Roughly about I think it's $450 a quarter.
Okay, that's that's really low. We should talk about
Right.
your project.
Okay.
And it may be that you also have a net metered project, but that it's just not clear how you're benefiting from it. So
Okay.
definitely let's set up a time to talk.
Most
Because I would
definitely.
definitely love to help you all figure it out. And like I've
Okay.
talked to a lot of folks in DC who um you know, don't, it's not clear how they're benefiting from the solar, and like let's try to get to the bottom of that for you all.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Yeah, are there any other questions? I know it's getting late and folks probably want to sign off, but happy to answer any other questions, or I'll just go ahead and throw my email in the chat again, and folks can feel free if you think of something later, like, send me a quick note. And, even if you're like, we probably can't move so forward with any of these projects now, like, but we might in the future, like, let me know, and then we can put you on our list of like, here are the folks that might be interested in doing something like this in the future. And then what I do is when I learn about a new program or a grant, then I, send it out to all the people I know who might want to do this. And so that way we can like keep in touch and, you know, as hopefully more things come up in the future that you could maybe benefit from.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Maddie. This has been awesome.